Hey, what's going on? Matt O'Leary back with another video, and today I'll be talking about Julio Jones wanting his way out of Atlanta and should the Jets get in on it. But before we get started, just wanted to mention you can follow me on social media at Matt O'Leary NY. If you haven't already, please make sure to check out the Just Jets podcast and subscribe to the Just Jets Clips channel down linked below. All right, so the other day it was made abundantly clear that Julio Jones wants no part of the Atlanta Falcons. He wants out. As he went on undisputed, we don't know if he knew he was live or not. It was very weird. Shannon Sharp had him on the phone, and there's no way I think he knew that he was live. I don't buy it. I think that he was just on the phone. He thought, oh, it's just a phone call with Shannon Sharp. But he was on live TV, and he pretty much came out and said, I am not going back to Atlanta, and I want out, and I want to go to a team that's going to win. So the Jets, while they might not fit the bill of a team that's going to win this year, what they do have is a boatload of draft picks. They have 4 next year in the first 2 rounds, which is important to have if you're going to be trading for a caliber of Julio Jones. So let's talk about Julio Jones a little bit, what his cap hit is, the kind of production he's going to be, and then answer the question at the end, should the New York Jets trade for him or no? So last year in 9 games, he only played 9 games. He had a hamstring issue. 771 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was extremely productive in the 9 games that he did play, even at his age of 31 years old. He's going to be 32 this year. Still a top 3 receiver in football, an unbelievable player, and a special talent. The previous 6 years before the injury that this past year, he had over 1,300 yards in each of those seasons. Still, as I said, at his age at 32 years old now, still a top 3 receiver in football. That's how good he is. That's how dynamic he is. And we saw what DeAndre Hopkins did for the Arizona Cardinals last year and what a top 5 receiver could do for your team. Understand that. And he has some connections with some guys on the Jets. For example, LaFleur was the passing game coordinator, or an offensive assistant rather, with the Atlanta Falcons, and Ulbrich was the defensive coordinator from the Atlanta Falcons last year. So we know that he has at least some familiarity with some of the coaches the New York Jets have in their system. So that's one thing. Now, if you were to look at the cap hits this year, it's $22.1 million. It would go down to $19.3 in 2022 and 2023. It's a hard deal to get out of. You're not going to be saving that much money. There's a lot of dead money involved with it if you were to move on from him after 1 year. So you're essentially locking yourself into a 32-year-old, 33-year-old, and 34-year-old Julio Jones. And while I completely understand that this is a game-changing wide receiver, at this point in his career, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that for 3 straight years in a row, to the point where you can pay him and afford to pay him essentially $20 million a year. So for that, and for the reason that the Jets are not a contending team, I don't think it makes sense for them. So I'm going to say no, stay away. I like the Jets receiving core as is, and I know there's no one who is as talented as Julio Jones on this roster. But if you were to bring in a guy like Julio Jones, does that stunt the growth and hurt the development of a Denzel Mims and Elijah Moore? I would argue yes. I would think it does. I don't know how those 2 guys are going to get reps when you have Corey Davis, who you paid money to, who's going to be ahead of him. And on top of that, you have a Julio Jones. I understand in fantasy world and in Madden, like, sure, this would be fun to have a Julio Jones type of player on this team for this year. But when you bring in the contract, when you bring in the long-term ramifications of what bringing a guy like him in could do, I say no. I don't think it makes a ton of sense for the New York Jets. I'm completely fine with rolling with the 5 wide receivers that they have. I think they have 5 good receivers. They have, start from the top. Davis is a quality starting outside receiver. Denzel Mims, I fully expect to take a leap in year 2. I think he'll be a solid starting outside receiver. In the slot, you have Jamison Crowder, who I think is a really good slot player. You also drafted the electric Elijah Moore at 34th overall, and you brought in Keelan Cole as your 5th receiver, and he's a damn good 5th receiver. He would be a good 4th receiver on most teams. He'd be a good 3rd receiver on most teams. They are deep, and I'm not saying that either one of those 5 that I just listed off are necessarily going to be stars. I think they'll all be solid receivers, but give me a batch of 5 solid receivers over a really good stud, an okay receiver, and then 3 nobodies after that. I'll take what the Jets have at receiver any day of the week. So I'm all good on Julio Jones. Don't want to give up the draft capital. Don't want to bring in a guy who's 32. Let him go to Dallas. Let him go to a team that's potentially, contending for a championship. Don't think it makes sense for the New York Jets. You let me know, though. Do you agree with me? Or do you think the Jets would be wise to give up high-end quality draft picks in order to get a 32-year-old wide receiver? Let me know in the comments below or on social media at MattO'LearyNY. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll talk to you next time.